Welcome to the Bulwark podcast. I'm Charlie Sykes, and we are joined by the usually incandescently filled with rage Tim Miller. But I got to tell you, Tim, by the way, good morning, Tim.
Good morning, Charlie. Congratulations. A
feeling,
granddaughter and a vaccine. Things are looking up in Wisconsin.
I am feeling mellow today about all of this. I have to tell you, for people who didn't see my newsletter or follow me on Twitter, early this morning, about 7 o'clock, Amelia K. Sykes was born. Big girl, my new granddaughter, which makes number 4, by the way. Makes
Wow.
number 4. I have to say, for some reason, this one excited me. Maybe because I knew it was coming today, or maybe I'm just at the age where it just seems sort of a little bit more meaningful.
Pandemic loneliness, maybe.
It could be that, and also, it's that feeling. You mentioned I'm going to be getting the vaccine on Monday. I should, by the way, mention this to Jim Swift. If I have the side effects to it, you might have to fill in on the podcast on Tuesday. You know what I'm saying? It's not a bad thing.
Noted.
No. So I just want to mention that I'm doing that. So I guess maybe it does sort of feel like sort of springtime in America again, or something like that, or springtime here in Mequon, Wisconsin. I mean, it's like we've had this long dark night. We have new life now, and some prospect that we'll be able to crawl out of our caves.
Yeah, it was 75 in Oakland yesterday. JVL was talking about how we should all be optimistic that normal is coming. We can be not rage-filled for a day. New life. I'm with you.
Well, and even here in Wisconsin, I mean, we have like 2 feet of snow on the ground, but it was in the 50s this week, so it's nice. that also feels like kind of a big deal around here. Okay, so we have a lot of things to talk about today. Some breaking news: the Manhattan DA has his hands now on Donald Trump's tax returns. What could go right there? Right? I mean, that's been something we've been waiting for a very long time, and I think it's important to note that it's not just the tax returns; it's like the whole file cabinet. I mean, all of those financial records. So that's something to keep in mind every time we talk about, what's going to happen in 2024. Well, let's find out the Manhattan DA. You have any thoughts about the?
I mean, look, I guess I just say this. I was never a fan of chasing after this is going to be the thing that fells Trump. I mean, well, we did fell him. We beat him last year, which is nice to remember from time to time. But yeah, I once sent a tweet in the middle, like, when I was trying to convince some of these soft Trumpers, many years ago, that was like, do any of you honestly believe if the Manhattan DA and that's DNY got to look at every financial transaction Donald Trump ever made, that would come out clean? I mean, do even people that support Donald Trump think that? Because I don't think so. I think everybody understands that during his time in business, he was at minimum cutting corners, at minimum avoiding taxes, at minimum, doing sketchy sort of things that benefited him. So, will any of that, hopefully, that will lead to pain for Donald Trump. One other thing that buoyed me, besides your granddaughter, was the lead sentence of Christian Vanderbook's article in the Bulwark yesterday about the series of humiliating losses that Trumpers have sustained, and that is nice to remember, and hopefully this will be another one of those. But I mean, what exactly is it? Is there something in there that would prevent him from running in 2024? Could you even find a jury anywhere in America that would convict Donald Trump that wouldn't have a single MAGA person on it? It's like all of that. I'm a little bit skeptical about, but I do think it's going to create, at minimum, some serious annoyances for him. And I think that the argument, over time, all of us continue to look righter and righter and righter, Charlie, and I think that it will continue to buoy that argument as we see more tangible evidence that this was a person that avoided taxes and broke the law, and in the law and order party, law and order for Mexicans, but not for me.
Well, there's a reason why Donald Trump really did not want these financial records to get into the hands of DAs. He really, really didn't want it, because for years and years and years, this guy was, as you pointed, cutting corners. He was inflating the value of things. He was committing what, if it was done by any other human being on earth, would be known as just flat out fraud, insurance fraud, tax fraud, all kinds of other things. And generally, when you catch somebody signing their name to a financial document with knowingly false information, that's going to be a problem, right? If you and I did that, we would end up in a whole world of hurt. And so, yes, there's going to be something that they're going to find there. Now, is it going to be kind of like what's the cliche about Al Capone, finally going down for tax evasion, and he murders all these people to get him on tax evasion? It may not be the sexiest thing in the world, but there are things that are technically known in the legal profession as the headshot, where if I find you doing this, you're just done. And I'm guessing there's a bunch of those in there. Okay, so the MBS report coming out from the Biden administration, that this is the Jamal Khashoggi report that will tie MBS to the murder of this American journalist. And this will be somewhat awkward for certain folks, won't it?
Yeah, Jared Kushner in particular. I mean, there were some reports, Stephanie Rule at MSNBC was reporting that Kushner was having relatively serious conversations about lucrative business partnerships deals with MBS after the end of the White House. So, I mean, maybe he just doesn't give an F about a journalist that writes for an American paper getting chopped to bits by someone, and it's just all about the greenbacks for Jared. I don't know, but I think that's going to make things very awkward. It's going to reinforce the fact that Donald Trump covered up an ally's absolutely grotesque and horrifying murder of a journalist over their just freedom of speech, over their reporting, over their speaking out about the regime. So I think that's going to make him awkward. And I'm hoping that this is a good sign for the Biden administration is going to continue to be clear-eyed on this sort of stuff. And they did the right things on Navalny. They're doing the right things on this. I've been helping my friend Mohammed Sultan. If you haven't seen this, he just has this amazing story where he was imprisoned in Egypt and has been fighting, and went on hunger strike and was finally released a few years ago, and now he started this group that is advocating for political prisoners in Saudi and Egypt. And like, this is, I think, good news for them, right? That these that MBS and Sisi and in Turkey, like they're gonna have to play ball on human rights to get for the Biden administration to play ball with them. Hopefully this is a signal of that sort of relationship is going to be restored, rather than this transactional relationship where if MBS buys some of my weapons, he can kill whoever the fuck he wants and Donald Trump will cover it up.
Which is literally apparently what the policy was. Okay, so we have a lot of things to get to today. Can I just mention that in my newsletter today I dropped a great height on Andrew Cuomo,
and I did in today's Not My Party over on Snapchat. If people didn't know, Not My Party is back on Snapchat. We've also posted up on YouTube. So
okay,
we are very aligned today on Andrew Cuomo.
Okay, I just think that before people say, well, this is whataboutism, well, you can't go out. No, look, this is one of the lessons we've learned, that everybody who is not Trump or the anti-Trump does not necessarily make them a good person. I call it the Michael Avenatti syndrome. You and I both remember Michael Avenatti when he was the hottest thing of hotness ever, and it turns out the guy's a complete con man, crook, liar, etc. And that should have been a cautionary tale. We should have realized, maybe we shouldn't rush to embrace people like Avenatti and Omarosa and Michael Wolff and all of those folks. But the Andrew Cuomo story, this guy, and I walk through the way that he was lionized, celebrated, and gushed over last year by the media. And now it's all falling apart. This accusation of sexual harassment. I mean, the guy is a creepy, he's a bully, he's a thug, as well as somebody who covered up the death of thousands of nursing home residents. I mean, it is really appalling. And I mean, it's not just that he was incompetent and boorish, but I think it's criminal, the fact that he actually withheld important data that could have saved people's lives in the midst of a pandemic. So this is not just a blunder. And so you look back and you go, shouldn't we have seen this coming? I mean, I know that we're all thinking, okay.
Didn't you see this coming, Charlie? Didn't you write about Andrew many months ago?
Well, I don't think I did. I may have said it. I mean, I wrote about Avenatti and like, we need to learn the lesson from this. Just because somebody is quote unquote on our side, we shouldn't assume that they are, that they're on the up and up. And by the way, there's a lot of categories of that. But this is one of those moments where you go back and you go, okay, Trump was horrible. and awful and everything. And it was almost like nobody wanted to also say, this guy Andrew Cuomo, maybe we shouldn't be writing articles about his nipples. Maybe we shouldn't be talking about Cuomo sexuality. Maybe we shouldn't be calling him America's governor, because this is a sketchy character. But we got sucked into it.
There's something about hearing you say the word nipples, Charlie, that's really got me twisted up this morning.
Okay, this is a real headline in the New York Post. I am not freaking making this up. Okay, well, let me get this here. New York Post actually ran a story with the headline, Andrew Cuomo's nipples take our minds off coronavirus.
Yeah, I mean,
New York Daily News headline: heartbroken Cuomo-sexuals lament loss of daily coronavirus briefings. Guy wrote a freaking book about himself. Okay,
in the middle
he got
of
an Emmy. He got an Emmy. Well, old people are dying in nursing homes, and he's lying about it.
Yeah, I don't. Maybe you didn't write about it, Charlie, but you definitely mentioned it. And we did, and I remember getting pushback. When I would do MSNBC and criticize him last year. From people who didn't like to hear it. I get it. I understand the reason, but it's been pretty obvious for a while. And, I think that you can see it, you don't want on the left to fall into the trap of what we're seeing with this, Trump, God King worship on the right, right? Where like you can't ever do anything wrong, right? I mean, because you get into this problem where you're calling Andrew Cuomo, you're saying you're a Cuomo-sexual, and he's writing a book about how great he did, while the pandemic is still going on and people are still dying, and his state has the highest deaths per capita. So yes, New York was hit the worst. Yes, he was dealt with a bad hand, but I remember firsthand. I'm here in Oakland. Us and Seattle were the first cities to lock down. I remember this. And New York, Cuomo and de Blasio were still arguing about it. And it went on for like a week or two. That they didn't lock down right at the height of it, right when it needed to be culled, when we were talking about flattening the curve. So in addition to the nursing home things, there were other decisions like that at the front. And it's not as if there weren't other people. In Not My Party today, I talked about Jay Inslee. Washington was actually the first state to we think that the coronavirus came in from China, and it was in Seattle. They have 4 times less death per capita in Washington than in New York. Now, not all of that is based on what the governors have done, but some of it is. Like Washington looks a lot more like what happened in Canada, where they didn't have the mask wars and all this stuff, than in New York. And 4 times fewer deaths in New York is a lot of people, if they had looked more like Washington. So I think I'm happy to see that, the mainstream media and really the more liberal media have been hammering Cuomo this week, and it's overdue, and it's time, and it shows that there isn't this equivalence, right? That you don't see any Democratic politicians going, "This is still Andrew Cuomo's party," like Jim Jordan with Donald Trump. But it's important to guard against this sort of stuff, because he's not the person to be putting on a pedestal. When it comes to this stuff, and just because he's in New York City and his brother's on CNN and they're funny.
Oh, that's bad though. No, see, I mean that whole thing now looks really creepy in retrospect, doesn't it? The back and forth. I found a story in People magazine gushing about the bickering, and the brothers not so good. Look, I guess one of the great principles in life is don't defend the indefensible. Don't get yourself into that mode, because I will tell you that is a chronic disease on the right, where you cannot criticize. I mean, that's how you get a cult of personality. You can't criticize anybody on the right. You have to come up with some whataboutism, and so you find yourself coming up with bizarre rationalizations for the worst people in the world. And trust me, that's not the way you want to live. That it burns your brain out. So, can I say something nice about somebody though?
Please.
So Liz Cheney is not going wobbly. This is an interesting story to me, because number one, you've seen all these other Republicans who sort of dip their toe in criticism, and then as soon as they see what the blowback is going to be, they run away. So you had Liz Cheney at that press conference yesterday, with Kevin McCarthy, and they're asked about Trump being at CPAC, and Kevin McCarthy does his usual blah 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 blah, and she steps up and says, "Hey, I just don't think that Donald Trump should have any role in the Republican Party." I mean, she's standing right there with all these other hacks like McCarthy and Scalise, and she just says it. This woman is not going wobbly. And then I don't know whether you heard the audio of this. She's doing an event for the Reagan, is it the Reagan Library, the Reagan Institute? Well, she's talking about all of this, and she, I mean, to say that she doesn't mince words is underplaying it a little bit, because she says, well, anyway, this has got the folks at the Federalist, I mean, undies way in a serious bundle about this. This is Liz Cheney at the Reagan event.
It's very important for us to ignore the temptation to look away. And it's very important, especially for us as Republicans, to make clear that we aren't the party of white supremacy. You certainly saw anti-Semitism. You saw the symbols of Holocaust denial, for example, at the Capitol that day. You saw a Confederate flag being carried through the rotunda. And I think we, as Republicans in particular, have a duty and an obligation to stand against that, to stand against insurrection. The president and many around him pushed this idea that the election had been stolen. And that is a dangerous claim. It wasn't true. There were, over 60 court cases where judges, including judges appointed by President Trump and other Republican presidents, looked at the evidence in many cases and said there is not widespread fraud and wouldn't grant the relief that the Trump campaign was seeking. So the idea that we in Congress were going to step in and somehow overturn the results of the election on January 6th was never true, was unconstitutional, was wrong.
So let me just say,
I'm doing a slow clap in my child's playroom right now.
Yeah, it's also, and this is what was I kind of made do the double take to hear her very explicitly calling out white supremacy and anti-Semitism. And I don't know whether you saw this, Blue Box Dave over at the Federalist saying, is she really saying the Republican Party is the party of white supremacy? She better defend that. No, that's not what she's saying. She's saying that the Republican Party needs to confront this because it's a reality. And the fact that she was willing to say the words, I think, is an indication that she's not only not backing off, I mean, she's leaning into this thing.
Well, I can see why the Federalists would be, would feel targeted when somebody mentions the fact that white supremacists are being led inside the House. And the Republican Party and the conservative movement, I guess they were probably correct about the fact that they were being, subtweeted there maybe by Liz Cheney. Here is the thing that is so refreshing about that and frustrating at the same time, is that everything she's saying is just true. She isn't really even editorializing that much in that statement, right? It's just like she's just laying out a series of fact after fact after fact. And it's like nobody else is saying it, and that has an R by their name, right? Except Kinzinger, and so just to hear a dispassionate breakdown of the fact that the Republican Party has a problem with white supremacy. The election wasn't stolen. We couldn't have done anything on January 6th. What Donald Trump did was dangerous. Donald Trump stirred this. I mean, those are all just simple facts, that she's saying in a very kind of, Cheney-esque fashion, right? And this was not... It's different than Kinzinger, right? Because he's kind of out there like tomahawk dunking on MTG and all this stuff, and God bless him. But this is not that. She's actually trying to speak to traditional Republicans who should know better and don't, and are all going along with this absolute nonsense. So good on her. I thought she looked a little nervous in that video yesterday where she was saying, that Donald Trump shouldn't be part of the party next to Kevin McCarthy and Scalise, which again, good on her, because it's a tough situation to do that. But again, she's right. That's the lot. This is the thing that's been frustrating all of us for so long over the last 4 years, is that people on the right will criticize Trump, but then not take the logical next step. Which is like, if you believe that he tried to steal an election that wasn't stolen, then of course he shouldn't have a role in the party or the country going forward, right? But these other folks won't go there, your Rob Portmans and your John Thunes, because they know what the blowback's going to be. So good on her, and I really enjoyed watching Steve Scalise like
Mm-hmm.
shake his head while she was talking, like trying to tut her when trying to, when she is just like laying him bare there in front of everybody. So yeah, good on her.
Going back to the Federalist for a moment, because actually, when you talked about how what she's saying is just incontrovertibly true, and that's what makes it so radical right now, because we just are in this ocean of bad faith arguments, twisted arguments, not just conspiracy fantasies, but just these sort of bizarre, whataboutism plays. This piece in the Federalist, Ben Dominic's publication. The Federalist, I think, is just you come for the bad faith and you stay for the bad writing or whatever is around. But Dave Marcus writes, Liz Cheney has defamed tens of millions of Republicans as white supremacists. I want to see her evidence. Okay, bullshit. That's not what she's saying. This whole thing, like, if you criticize anyone in the party, if you criticize Marjorie Taylor Greene, if you point out that Donald Trump is lying about the election, you are defaming 75 million. That bullshit victim card is just, it's the laziest bad faith argument out there. What she is saying is exactly what William F. Buckley said, Ronald Reagan said. Other people say there's no place in this party for bigots. We have a problem. We need to be concerned about the ideological hygiene of our party. We are not. We need to make it clear that we are not these people. And so, but the folks at the Federalist are like, well, you can't even bring this up because we can't denounce white supremacy because otherwise that's denouncing everybody.
Yeah, well, you can't bring this up because they know they're guilty. I mean, this is the thing, Charlie. Like, Liz wasn't defaming them, but I will. Like, I'll defame the Federalist. I'll defame the people who know better and are part of this. And I think that most people at the Federalist do know better. You remember Ben Domenech, who runs the Federalist, wrote, I think, and I know this is going to knock your socks off to hear this, one of the most prescient and clear-eyed articles about the Trump era back in 2015, where he said that our party is on the precipice of where we have to decide whether we're going to become a white identity nationalist party in the vein of Europe or a party that cares about freedom. And in that article, he cited on the side of we need to be on the side of freedom. Well, what happened is Donald Trump made the party a party of white nationalism, white identity politics, and the Federalists said, "Okay, we're on board."
Yeah.
So Ben saw the choice, and he saw the choice clear. He's not these are not people who are like voters in out in the country who don't follow all this closely and are culturally conservative or whatever, or pro life, and they're going to stick with the party. All that those voters, you can't judge every 74.2 million people, but the people at the Federalist saw the choice and they picked and they picked the white identity politics door. So I mean, that's just that is just the reality. And Donald Trump was tweeting white power videos during the campaign and not apologizing for it. He put a guy that was involved in kind of white nationalist, elite culture, and Stephen Miller in charge of the country's entire immigration regime. I mean, he was literally a friend and ally of Richard Spencer, who ran the modern day KKK. So, we don't need to split hairs here about what Donald Trump was doing and what kinds of people were at the insurrection. I mean, they had damn Confederate flags and Holocaust denial shirts on.
This is such a great point. I'm tempted to say you're just not another pretty face there, Tim Miller. But
thank you, guys
like Ben Dominic and is it Dominic or Domenech or
I don't know, whatever,
or just Mr. Meghan McCain. I don't know, what do we call him? I just guys like him and Tucker Carlson need to be distinguished from just your other knuckle dragging, mouth breathing types, because they know the choice they're making. They knew better. They looked at this and they saw it very, very clearly. Here are two paths for the party. And when the party went down the path of white identity politics, they kind of shrugged their shoulders and said, "Okay, we're in too." Or in the case of Ben, got off the phone with whoever it is who's funding the Federalists and decided to go along with it. But yes, they know it. They made the choice with the full understanding of the moral weight of what they were doing.
Yeah, now they're saying we can't criticize them for it because they don't want to own up to their choice.
Good. Okay, so Marjorie Taylor Greene. Oh, by the way, did you see what Bill Kristol's in a new phase of his career? Have you noticed this? Bill's all out of fucks to give. I mean, seriously. So he tweeted out this morning. I hear Matt Schlapp is trying to replace young Pharaoh at CPAC. He's the guy that the anti-Semite that they canceled in an event called America Uncanceled. Anyway, I hear Matt Schlapp's trying to replace young Pharaoh at CPAC with Marjorie Taylor Greene's polyamorous tantric sex guru. Oh. You know, I'm old enough to remember when Bill Kristol probably would not be tweeting about a polyamorous tantric sex guru, but I am very much here for it.
I'm here for it too, and I'm going to get to Bill in a second. But I want to spend a little time on young Pharaoh and MTG. Did you? I'm sorry to admit that I have not yet listened to yesterday's podcast. So have you listened to and played young Pharaoh ripping on Matt Schlapp?
No, I have listened. We didn't play it on the podcast.
It is really good if the listeners haven't listened to it, because he's like, I said the same exact stuff that this guy did. Like, he's out there Googling Matt Schlapp and all of Matt Schlapp's crazy racist comments. And he's like, what? And he's like, they're canceling the black guy? Like, Matt Schlapp gets to run this thing? And he's just saying the same stuff that me. I mean, it was some real talk from young Pharaoh, which was really enjoyable, and I'd recommend people read. But as far as MTG and her polyamorous tantric sex lover, which as far as I'm concerned, good on her, no judgment here. I've got a lot of other problems with MTG. What she was doing yesterday with the trans, attacking Marie Newman.
Okay, tell the story, because this may be a little bit inside baseball. What she actually did yesterday?
Yeah, sure. So Marie Newman, I think I'm pronouncing that right, is a congresswoman out of Illinois, and she has a trans child. And so she posted yesterday on Twitter that she was putting a trans flag outside her office, which was across the hallway from Marjorie Taylor Greene's office, as a protest to the fact that Marjorie Taylor Greene was not supporting the Equality Act.
Yeah.
Marjorie Taylor Greene then creates a literal poster, which she puts outside her office that says, "Trust the science," in quotations, but it doesn't say who she's quoting with that. So maybe it's sort of like a royal quotation. Trust the science. There are only two genders. I think I have that right. Something to that effect. Something to poke Marie Newman in the eye over trans rights. So I just, for starters, all of this is so childish, and it's just so offensive, that like this is what she's to be known for. But I did think that, there's this joke that goes around online about how these new Congress folks like aren't actually legislators; they're just posters. Like, they just think their job is to post things on the internet, and like that's all she's there for. And I did appreciate that. Like, she made that literal. Like this is Marjorie Taylor Greene literally believes, I think, her job is to post on Twitter and to make posters that own the libs, and she's owning her neighbor in the hallway and trying to make it a hostile workplace and insult her trans daughter. It's just like, this stuff is so it is so
she's got a lot of time. She's got a lot of time on her hands now, right? She doesn't have to go to any committee hearings. So
that's true. And maybe that was the argument for keeping her on the committees, because she's like, what else do I have to do? I'm going to make this poster that is bigoted against trans people and that attacks the Democrats that are in the hallway.
Jeez.
I mean, what the hell else is she going to do? I mean, it really, we're a long way from the halcyon days of our deliberative body, Charlie.
No, it's going to be 24/7 shitposting for her. And we actually talked about this on yesterday's podcast with Karen Tumulty, the number of United States senators who also seem to think that their job is not about legislating or sitting in committees and, compromising legislation or solving problems. It is just shitposting. Okay, so here's a quick digression, because when I go out and I walk my dogs up and down the driveway, because that's my, we'll just go for a walk here. I was listening to Sirius XM, and they were playing an excerpt from this, Joe Biden coming out of a meeting on the supply chain, protecting the supply chain, which is really nerdy and wonky stuff, guaranteeing that we don't have a breakdown in the supply chain. And I have to say that I actually stopped at one point and thought, this is so amazing. Hearing a president talk about having a meeting, a bipartisan meeting, where they were trying to solve an actual problem in the world. How do you make sure that you have enough PPP masks, that you don't have a breakdown in the supply chain for semiconductor chips and things like that? And it felt like just sort of like being beamed to a different time and different planet. You know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
just, it was like, it's like this is not culture war aspect. There's nothing there. There was no insults. There was no tweets. It's a guy who's talking about how important it is in this country that we have an efficiently running supply chain, and the boringness of it and the substance of it was in some ways just glorious. It was a glorious moment.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure we've kind of beat Flying Ted to death, though. But like, this is, I do
No.
think that this posting, this mindset that Ted doesn't actually think that his job is about, resolving the supply chain issues, or figuring out what to do in Texas when people are freezing, and that he might as well just go to Cancun. I do think that that underlied the mindset, right? Because once you get into this attitude where your job is really just to like dunk on Chris Murphy on Twitter, and like that's your you did your duty for the day, and do some fundraising calls, then your brain gets warped, right? And you do start to ignore this kind of stuff like that. I do think that there are real kind of consequences to their attitudes on that.
That there are. Speaking of like who we've been dunking on, I have to say that I'm somewhat delighted to see that the term Ronanon is kind of catching on now for Ron Johnson. I didn't come up with it, although I've done my part in popularizing it. But I see now that Brian Williams is now using Ronanon to describe Ron Johnson.
Well, Brian Y is a Bulwark fan, so it's possible he was listening. I was lavishing for Bulwark Plus members. I thought it was you that coined it, so I was lavishing you with praise on the Next Level podcast yesterday. But I, it is worth reiterating that what Ron Johnson did, and now we're back to the Federalists, by the way, that what Ron Johnson did, and I know you talked about this already on the pod, but it was one of the most disgusting and unconscionable things that has happened on the Senate floor, since the time of segregation. I mean, I know that we have this outrage fatigue, and that so much happened during the Trump administration, but like the idea that the Capitol could be attacked by white nationalists and Confederates trying to overthrow the results of the election, that we would have our first non-peaceful transition of power in the nation's history, and that Ron Johnson would then go on the Senate floor and side with the terrorists and say, actually, no, guys, these were just good folks that love the police, that were just they something just happened, it got out of control because the victims, the cops were wearing too short of skirts, and they were asking for it. It was it was a truly just disgusting display to read this article from this hack in the Federalist onto the Senate floor.
Yeah, it was, and
so he deserves Ronanon, I guess, is my
well,
point.
I mean, and again, it's the fact that he's being compared unfavorably to Ted Cruz and Josh Hawley at this point, which is, I got to say, and I confessed this yesterday, I no longer claim to understand what's going on inside his head, except that whoever he's talking to is feeding him the worst stuff. So
I will just say really quick on
here
this. If
yeah.
you go back to that Mark Becker article that we ran in the Bulwark,
Oh yeah, from
where he
Wisconsin, right.
yeah, he had the private conversation with Ron Johnson. It went on for like a half hour,
Yeah,
and the headline of that article was that Ron Johnson knew the election wasn't really stolen.
sure.
But there was an underlying point in the article that I thought that there was this direct line to his performance on the Senate floor, and that was when he told Mark that the people that go to MAGA rallies really do love this country, and that the people that go to Bernie Sanders rallies don't. And I do think that Ron Johnson believes that, and that over the course of the last 5 years, he's come to this conclusion that the Donald Trump supporters are, being whatever attacked, that they're aggrieved, and that they are the true, stakeholders, the true, people that are being passed the American tradition, down from 1776 to them, and that they should be exalted, and that if you have that mindset, and that it's the Bernie Sanders people that are trying to ruin this country, and the Trump people that are the ones that really truly love the country, then you can understand why he might then think, well, it couldn't have been them. it had to have been a couple of Antifa provocateurs that made it happen. And so I don't know, Ron long enough to know when that happened in his brain, but I do think that I saw a definite connection there.
No, I actually think that's I think you're right about that. So here's an interesting quote that was just posted on twitter.com by Jim Wigderson, who's the editor of Right Wisconsin, this right-wing website that was actually founded by me. But James has been doing a great job. He posted this quote from Senator Margaret Chase Smith. This dates back to 1950. The nation sorely needs a Republican victory, but I do not want to see the Republican Party ride to political victory on the four horsemen of calumny, fear, ignorance, bigotry, and smear. The four horsemen of calumny: fear, ignorance, bigotry, and smear. And of course, she's talking about another senator from Wisconsin. She's talking about Senator Joseph McCarthy. So one of the great moments in American political history is when Republican Senator Margaret Chase Smith stands up on the floor of the Senate and says, look, I'm a Republican. We cannot go there. We cannot be the party of fear, ignorance, bigotry, and smear. And she was taking on a senator from Wisconsin. Jeez.
Yeah, I mean, could you have four better words for the party right now? Fear, bigotry, ignorance, and smear. I do have to ask: is it calumny? Is it calumny? Calumny? How do you say that word?
You know what? That's one of those many, many words that.
Okay, well, this has been kind of my word of the month. I included it in an article. I snuck it in an article as an inside Twitter joke because the Nebraska GOP, said that Ben Sasse was committing calumny, whatever it is, against Donald Trump, and I was like, what a weird word for this censure to be just like dumped into this censure of Ben Sasse, and so I made a joke that I was gonna try to use it, and here it is again, Margaret Chase Smith. I keep seeing the calumny is following me everywhere in February of 2021.
Well, okay, and here's another one. I got a lot of reaction on this one from the podcast the other day. How do you pronounce the word DOUR? Because of course, Donald Trump used that word to describe Mitch McConnell. Obviously, he didn't
Dour?
that word. Yeah,
Dour?
you pronounce it. I pronounce it doer, but I have had many. I have had many. You think that's wrong? I had many people who say, no, it's dour. So I believe that there are alternative pronunciations, but I'm willing.
The Wisconsin doer.
Well, I have to tell you, see, this is the irony that I think that on the podcast, when I read that and I, when I read Trump's statement about, the dour, humorless Mitch McConnell, I think it was probably the first time that I'd ever pronounced it that way. I think I've always pronounced it the other way, dour. So I have no idea. And it's one of those things where I just haven't gotten around to what's the right answer? I don't know.
I think I'm correct on this one. Jim Swift has slacked me. He wrote I thought that Margaret Chase quote sounded familiar. Jim Swift himself last June wrote an article about Margaret Chase Smith in that speech. So we should shout him out, and folks who want to learn a little bit more about calumny and the four horsemen of the GOP can go read It's Time for Another Declaration of Conscience by Jim Swift, the great Jim Swift, Bulwark podcast producer.
He's right about that. And this is one of those things that drives me crazy about the lack of interest in how history is going to remember you. Margaret Chase Smith will always be remembered for her courageous stand then, as opposed to, I could read you a list of other Republican senators from 1950. And if you recognize more than 3 or 4 names, I'd be surprised. I mean, it's like, even you're United States Senator, you're a big fucking deal right now. Guess what? You're going to be totally obscure. You're not even going to make Trivial Pursuit cards. They're just not. They have cards for Trivial Pursuit anymore. Okay, so Tim Miller, you had a topic you want to talk about. I'll let you choose the next topic.
Okay, I do want to come to, and we'll do more on this for folks. I'm going to do your hosting job because you are not on tonight as a new grandfather, but I'm on the Thursday night Bulwark tonight. So if
Thursday night Bulwark, okay.
If you want to just hang out with us for an hour, I'm going to be drinking tonight. So there'll be even more calumny than there is right now. So if you want to become a Bulwark Plus member, but my topic that I really wanted to hit today was Bill Kristol wrote for the Bulwark about this whole conversation that we will continue to have for years to come about kind of wither the Never Trump movement. Is it worth fighting within the Republican Party? Should we have a third party? Joe Walsh has an article today in the Bulwark about the argument for a third party. Bill's argument was essentially, that there is an absence of discussion around whether former Never Trump Republicans really fit best in kind of this Biden wing of the Democratic Party, and that they should work with Biden Democrats. And, we could do a whole hour show on this, and I'm sympathetic to Bill's point of view on that. But what I want to talk about is many of our former Never Trump friends, at National Review and the Dispatch and elsewhere, went at Bill on this, and we're like, this is crazy that the Democrats have gone so far to the left. Like, what are we? How could you do this? Like, you're blind. And I just need to say a word and no F's to give Bill Kristol's defense on this. Not just because I'm sympathetic to him, but because Bill Kristol put his money where his mouth was on Donald Trump from day freaking one. And earlier when I was talking about Liz Cheney and how, her actions, were the necessary consequence of her words, right? If you really believe that Donald Trump is this great of a threat, you have to treat him as such and act like it. Bill Kristol tried to recruit someone to run against him at the end of 2016. He supported impeachment, without reservation. He recruited Joe Walsh and others to try to run against him in a primary. When that didn't work, he worked with me and others to try to help support moderate Democrats in the Democratic primary, so it wasn't Bernie running against him, with an organization. Then in the general election, he gave a clear-eyed view on Joe Biden and the need for Joe Biden to win. Bill Kristol saw Donald Trump for who he was and recognized that he needed to work with people, sometimes Republicans, sometimes Democrats, in order to stop him. Stop the menace that tried to steal the election and end our democracy from being president again. And now a bunch of people who say they were never Trump, say they didn't like Donald Trump, but really couldn't decide whether Donald Trump or Joe Biden was better. I mean, it was such a tough call. I don't know. I just have to write in Edmund Burke, or I'm just going to write in my dad for president because, man, they seemed bad. Now are saying that it's Bill Kristol that is sacrificing his principles. Bullshit. Like, I've had enough of that. Like, if you could not decide between a just normal, inoffensive Democrat who, I'm sure you disagree with on a couple issues, and Donald Trump, who tried to steal the election and end our democracy, then I just, your judgment is so poor that I do not need to hear, your rants from your high horse right now when people who are living in reality try to actually navigate the choices in front of us. So I don't mind folks that land, in good faith in different places on this, but that really ground my gears. So I wanted to shout Bill out on the podcast on that.
Well,
front.
That's good. This is a tough decision. I mean, I really wrestle with all of this because, I don't want to go from one tribe to another tribe. I know there are some people who I'm just a Democrat. No, I'm not just a Democrat. I don't even know what that means to say these things. I mean, I want to be able to make up my own mind on things. And so, but I would see myself, for example, I'd vote for an Abigail Spanberger, Democratic congressman from Virginia. Connor Lamb, I have no problem. He's been a guest on this podcast. I'd be glad to vote for her. I would definitely vote for Claire McCaskill over Josh Hawley in Missouri if she was ever. That's kind of an easy one. I didn't have a problem voting for, and if I had the choice, voting for some of these Democrats. On the other hand, I also want to have a hand to make sure that there are people who are going to be voting for the Adam Kinzingers in the Republican primary, or the Liz Cheneys in the Republican Party, or any of the other folks that took a principal position, because, right now we are still a two-party country. And it is important to have two rational parties. But I think Bill's point is, at some point, look, if the Republican Party turns itself into this white identity, authoritarian, anti-democratic party, then a lot rides on the success of the Biden administration. If Biden fails and these people come back into power in the form they are right now, that is a very dangerous thing for America. So it's an alliance that is difficult for some of us, but I think it's also necessary. And I think that's the point that he was trying to make. Doesn't mean you give a blank check to them or that you support them on everything, but there are going to be these
Totally.
areas of
That's why it was
agreement.
titled "Work with Biden." It
It's like
wasn't
work with
titled like
him.
"Worship Biden." Like that was
That's
not the
right.
title of the
Yeah,
article.
it didn't say rubber stamp Biden, go along with Biden. I actually think that we're in an interesting moment now, where they, believe it or not, this is what's so weird, because I mean, obviously we know how divided we are and everything, blah blah blah. We know that, but the ideological divide between the two parties on issues of substance is actually not that huge. I mean, think about, what is the state of the argument about the minimum wage? Okay, so the Democrats want to raise it by $15 an hour. Mitt Romney and Tom Cotton are out there saying no, $10 an hour. Okay, well, that's what a negotiation looks like. Okay, this is not like black and white. This is a negotiation. Child child benefits. You have Mitt Romney out, proposing the $3,000 child benefits. And again, so it's not this, yes versus no on some of these things. So it's kind of this weird moment where there's probably more ground where we can work together to solve problems. How do we get out of the coronavirus? How do we keep the economy going? How do we deal with some of these problems like supply chain integrity, et cetera? And yet we're off talking about the cancel culture and the culture wars and stuff like that.
Well,
Yeah, we
that's where the clear lines are, right? I mean, Charlie.
we can work with one another on these things.
Yeah, I mean, to your point, like, because since the Republicans have given up, being the part, there was a great Jonathan Chait article this morning that for like, a century, the Republicans fought to end the New Deal, and like they've conceded the fight, right?
Totally,
On some
yeah.
of these economic points, there are differences, but they're negotiations. It's on these fundamental questions, of do you believe that we should have a democratic republic or not?
Yes,
right?
right.
Does everybody have the right to vote? Where the differences are so stark, and I think that is, again, in support of Bill's argument of saying, well, if only one side is going to be in pro-democracy, isn't there some value in trying to, work within that side to, kind of advance, policies that you think are better for the country? I was making this argument yesterday on the Next Level. I'm a little frustrated by some of what Romney is doing, by only preaching to the Republican choir who aren't going to work with the Democrats, right? I mean, if Romney took Bill's approach, which is work with Biden, wouldn't he be going to the White House and saying, hey, I think that this stimulus would be better if it was 1.6 trillion instead of 600, instead of 1.9 trillion. And we, got rid of these two dumb ideas and replaced it with this one good idea. I bet Biden would say, heck yeah. Whereas like writing a Wall Street Journal op-ed, dunking on him and going on Fox News Radio, I think that is an old mindset, where we're in this kind of warfare, like the Obama era mindset that led us to where we were at a little bit.
But also there's a push and pull. I mean, and this is the place for fiscal conservatives. Like, for example, on the debate about the minimum wage, we're no longer stuck on the question of, well, should there be a minimum wage or not? If that's accepted, we're going to have a minimum wage. And the back and forth is, we should raise the minimum wage, but, and I think this would be Romney's point, let's do it in a way that destroys the fewest jobs. Because what we're seeing from the CBO is that, yes, raising the minimum wage to $15 an hour will raise 900,000 people out of poverty, but it will also destroy more than 1 million jobs. So is there some way that we can do this? Is there some way of balancing it out so that you make it a living wage, you make sure that work pays, which should be a conservative value, the dignity of work, that people work hard, should be rewarded for it. This is something that I think conservatives should embrace, but you want to do it in such a way that you do as little harm as possible. So that's where this dialogue between the right and the left can in fact be constructive. All right. So
yeah, I don't disagree with that. I guess my point is that it's more of a question of a mindset of how you look at it, which is, are you dealing with Biden to try to get this done, to try to help him succeed? Or is it, I'm going to take this opposite position over here and, we're going to shoot at each other, right? Like, I just think that there are kind of two ways to look at it. We'll see how things shake out. And I think that is, it's maybe worth the Romneys and the Toomeys and some of these folks to kind of think about how they can have the most impact. And it might require a little bit of a change in mindset of how to deal with the Democrats than what was, the MO during the Obama years.
So I appreciate the fact that you brought up the Thursday night live stream. So for people who are Bulwark Plus members, that is at 8:00 Eastern time. And if you're a member of Bulwark Plus, we send out the link to it. It's a Zoom call. There is alcohol that is you have to bring your own. It is not supply. But what is the topic tonight? Do you know? Because we do this on a rotating thing. There are so many of us at the Bulwark. We are just sort of that we. You
put me on the spot, Charlie. I just usually drink 2 beers and just kind of get ready to bring my takes. I'm not running the show tonight. JVL is at the helm, so I'm sure we'll bemoan the state of affairs.
Do you think we'll talk about CPAC? You think we'll talk about CPAC?
We will. I have to suffer through CPAC today, so I will be talking about it. I'm going to write about it for the site.
Really? That's great.
So somebody's got to do it. Somebody's got to keep their eyes on what's happening down there.
How do you do that? I mean, is it live stream? I mean, it's
on the World Wide Web,
on the internets. You can watch you can watch CPAC.
Amazing the technology these days.
Well, this is one of those things where I don't think that you and I would necessarily be welcome at CPAC this year.
No, I don't think I'd get a warm welcome at CPAC this time around.
Tim Miller, thank you for joining me on the podcast. I appreciate it very much.
See you, Charlie.
And thank you all for listening to today's Bulwark podcast. I'm Charlie Sykes. We will be back tomorrow, and we will do this all over again.